Hi guys, this is Fran and I've got a new video for you all. This time around, we've got a piece that was also inspired by my original character, ALISTAIR. For those of you that weren't around for their creation, I made two original characters, ALISTAIR and Boris, for a story I was going to call Drowning Arrows. That eventually became my username. So later on, I changed the project name to Come Find Me. But anyway, this isn't meant to be ALISTAIR. The portrait is just inspired by a quote I wrote for one of the chapters. I found the idea of an angel underwater very interesting for some reason, so I was excited to do this portrait. But I must say my confidence wasn't 100% throughout this thing. There were many times during the process where I found myself very doubtful of the direction I was going. There was even a point where I really thought the portrait was ugly and I wanted to quit. Something about the face and the body just wouldn't click, and I found myself so frustrated. I would try to just keep my doubts aside and work on things I knew were going right for the portrait. Like the lighting was going okay and the proportions were fine. And I just felt that if I got that right, everything else would just fall into place. Eventually, I found ways to fix the things that were bothering me. While working on this, I realized that this is the first realistic piece that I've worked on where I had to draw the whole body, like including hands and feet. It's been a long time since I've had to do that. It was a challenge, and I normally don't like drawing hands, like who does, am I right? These hands are very tricky for my level, but in the end, I must admit that I'm very proud of how they turned out. I actually love the lighting for them and the pose that I chose, and I think they're pretty. The second hurdle in this portrait were the legs. I have hardly drawn bodies in challenging perspectives, and these legs were both in different perspectives. His right leg is supposed to be closer to the camera than his left leg, therefore it should be foreshortened. Well, your boy isn't good in that regard, so yes, I tried my best, but I know it's something I have to work on in the future. Honestly, the idea of these portraits wasn't to improve on my skill, even though I know that will come regardless the more I work on them. But during the process, I noticed I was slightly faster at working on this portrait than I was with the other ones I had already done. So once I reached the coloring stage, I really wanted to work with a teal green for the underwater colors, but for some reason it just didn't work out. I tried so much to make it work, but the colors just didn't mesh well, and instead of battling out, I decided to go with your typical blue for the underwater color. I followed my own advice when it comes to adding colors to the shadows of the body, and I think the final outcome for it is close to what I wanted, because let me confess that it's not 100% what I imagined, but it's 90%, and that is good enough for me right now. Throughout these portraits, I feel like I've come up with a clever way to make wings easier to draw. Because believe it or not, wings are not my favorite part of drawing angels. I hate rendering them. They're very easily my favorite part of angels when it comes to just looking at an angel, but just the thought of sitting there rendering every feather and making it seem realistic when it comes to wing anatomy, it's just not my favorite while I'm working on them. But when all is said and done, they kind of are my favorite things in my portraits. Perhaps because I've learned to cut corners and still make them look decent? I'm not sure. But while we're at it, another point of stress I had with this portrait was the white flowy cloth I used to cover his angel bits, which I may or may not censor. Not because I actually drew anything there, but because YouTube can be sensitive about these things regardless. I don't know, you let me know what I ended up doing because I am writing the script and I've yet to edit the video. Anyway, yes, the cloth was a pain. I couldn't find a nice reference for the cloth. Well, I say it cloth, but it's more like a veil. Like I meant it to be more like a veil, consistency and texture, than just a regular cloth. And because of that, I knew that the shadows and highlights were going to be a little different. I don't know. Again, it's the same as the portrait in general. It's not 100% what I wanted and what I imagined, but it gets the job done. It looks like a cloth and it covers what it needs to cover. Something I left out of this portrait and from my other portraits so far is body hair. I don't know how to paint that, and let me explain. When I do cel-shaded artwork, it's easy for me to add body hair everywhere because the art style is simple. I get to just use plain lines to represent the forests of hair I typically love to see on my male subjects. However, when I paint or draw in this style, a simple line just looks out of place, and I don't have the patience to try and fix it. I know there's gotta be a way to painterly add body hair, but I just haven't found it. I'm gonna research it, and if I find something on it, trust me, I will try my best to add body hair to my next portraits. Who knows, I might even make a video showing y'all how to do it, and might even go back to some portraits and add some. Who knows? You just might end up with a bunch of hairy angel portraits. While on the subject of hair, that's also a thing that I'm not necessarily struggling with, but I find it isn't as easy as I thought it was for me. Like, I've done hair before, but I'm not trying to sit here and render every single strand of hair. Working on my cel-shaded work has spoiled me so much because hair is literally just shapes with different hues and values for those. And I guess it could also work for this style, but it turns out looking too cartoony and I gotta go in there and render it more. It is probably just something I gotta keep practicing. I'm gonna do some research as well on that and we'll see. I just need help on everything, don't I? I guess it is just because these portraits have been lacking references. I've mostly been using an app to help me with the pose and the lighting, and then everything else is just drawing from my memory bank of things I've seen and drawn in the past. Which, by the way, I use 2 great apps that help me with posing and lighting. Let me know if you want to see a video about them and how I personally use them. I might just make a quick short on them, but if you would like to see a detailed video, let me know. Also, there's a few things I'm going to try to challenge myself with on these portraits. Maybe not all of them, but for some. Backgrounds. Yes, I want the main focus to be the angel, but backgrounds can help the overall portrait, and it's something I do need lots of practice with. For this one in particular, it's a simple background, so I didn't really get the chance to exercise that muscle. However, even though it was simple, I did struggle with it. Mostly due to me not having a reference for the angle of the water. I must confess that the bottom part of the ocean in my portrait was supposed to be more detailed, but I lacked the patience to try to work out the angles and the perspective. So I chickened out and I used shadows to hide everything. I think at some point I was trying to add underwater cliffs and leafage, but ultimately decided against it because I wasn't really convinced by it. What I gotta say really surprised me was the underwater textures at the top. I'm sure there's a name for it, but I don't feel like looking that up at the moment. Anyway, I enjoyed painting that so much. I like how up close it doesn't look like anything, but once you take a step back, you can see what it's supposed to resemble. I had to look at so many references for that. I had 2 ways of approaching it. One was the way that you will see in the video, and the other was that I was going to mirror the angel and distort it with liquify to create an underwater reflection effect kind of thing. I'm sure that would have looked great, but I'm glad I did it the way I did. There's obviously room for improvement, but it works, and it works well. After all is said and done, I did enjoy working on this. I don't feel like it's my best work, but I feel I learned so much from working on it. I think every time I add the colors, I get just a little bit more confident with them that maybe, I'll start my portraits with colors soon. I don't know how soon, but I mean, maybe. Don't hold it against me if I decide to stick to grayscale at first, though. It's all about the baby steps. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say about this. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any suggestions for anything you've seen or heard in this video. I'm learning and I would appreciate any and all criticism/advice. I want to make the best art videos I can. But with that, I will say goodbye. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!